Hurricane Milton is strengthening rapidly in the southwest Gulf of Mexico, and we may have a buzzsaw on our hands by this time tomorrow. We're going to talk all about Milton, the impacts on Florida, which are going to be sizable. And of course, we're going to look at the rather autumnish pattern that is setting up for the Northeast and Mid Atlantic states and back to the Great Lakes and Ohio Valley for this week and through next weekend into the first part of next week. And that's all coming up right here on this Sunday night Joe and Joe Weather Show podcast. And you can support the Joe and Joe Weather Show podcast if you choose to by using the Amazon link that is pinned to the top of the chat board. This referral link will send you to Amazon. You use the search bar, buy whatever it is you're going to buy, and Amazon will throw back a little bit of coin for sending you there. It doesn't cost you a cent. And we here on the Joe and Joe Weather Show podcast appreciate your continued support. So, the recon as a recon there right now. There's actually two recons that are there. I like that they have two planes going in at the same time. And rapid strengthening began earlier today, and here we are this evening, and it continues. Joe, I just looked at the latest recon, which I'll show everybody in a moment. Here it is, recon. So the plane flew in from the northwest side, the weaker side. So coming in 50 knot winds. But the pressure, Joe, is now dropped down to about now they'll do some adjustments on the advisory. So the plane had what looks like about a 978 pressure. So it continues to drop at about 1 to 2 millibars an hour and it shows no signs of leveling off. I think, you know what I think is going to happen? I think that there is a chance that when it reaches the middle Gulf, that where the water temperatures were are just as high as they were 2 weeks ago, untouched by Helene, upwelling, uh, that we could have it could reach category 4. I think there's even an outside chance it might even nudge up to a category 5. But
Wow.
what that's my guess because I don't see anything really to get in the way unless there's some dry air someplace, and I'm not seeing it. Now, when it gets into the eastern Gulf, the water temperatures are about 2 degrees Fahrenheit lower than they are in the central Gulf. I mean, it's not a huge amount. It's a 30 C or higher in the middle Gulf, 29 C in the eastern Gulf. So at that point, maybe this it'll probably come back a little bit, but I think you'll have I think you're going to have every bit of a category, at least a category 3 hurricane making landfall on the Florida West Coast sometime during the day on Wednesday. That's my prediction.
You know, when you made the buzzsaw analogy, it made me think back to, my goodness, it's been now over 30 years, 1992 with Hurricane Andrew. And the funny thing is with Andrew was that it cut pretty much across the same area of Florida, except it came in from the east. It was moving from east to west, and Milton is going to be moving from west to east and cutting through basically or roughly the same region that was hit by Andrew back in '92. And as you know, we when we saw Andrew, I forget now, was Andrew when it made landfall at Florida, was it a four? I think it was a four.
5. It was a 5.
It was a five.
Yeah. But
Well, you know,
Andrew was actually a very small storm geographically in terms of
yeah.
the extent of gales and the extent of hurricane force winds and the buzzsaw winds of 165 or whatever it was. But it was a relatively small storm. Uh, and right now, when you look at Milton, it is also a bit on the smallish side in terms of
It's so,
geography coverage. When I say small, I just want to be clear on that before somebody misinterprets it.
now, if you're old enough to remember or of a certain age, you'll understand when I say let us hope that Milton doesn't turn into a monster.
Oh, well, that yeah. Well, we of course don't want to see that happening. Also, you know, we've been sort of having this issue in general in the world of weather for a number of years, and it just seems to get magnified every year, and it's really magnified a lot in the last couple of days. And I would just suggest for those of you who, I mean, our regulars that are on the chat board, they know the difference, they know the score here. Unfortunately, we live in a world now, Joe, where people get their their um, their weather information from Facebook posts, from TikTok posts in particular, which, in my view, are extremely dangerous to rely on that sort of information because a lot of what I saw this weekend, not just in relation to the storm, but in all sorts of other things going on with Helene and the rescue efforts and FEMA. There is a lot of lies being posted on the internet about what is going on with all of this. The new one is that no one, oh my God, this is all being orchestrated by the government, that
Well,
Milton no storm has ever crossed the Gulf of Mexico from west to east and moved into Florida. Okay, wrong. Okay. All right, all right. So just bear that in mind for those of you who are tuning in for the first time. Maybe you're not familiar with what we do here on the Joe and Joe Weather Show podcast. It's a novel concept we have here. We actually do weather. Okay, we don't do we don't do BS. We don't do political crap. We don't do any of that. Okay. Nor will we do that. And for the most part, we don't tolerate it. So if you're thinking about jumping on the chat board to say something stupid, uh, go on ahead, try, watch what happens. But in all seriousness, Joe, you're dealing with, we've got a hurricane here. It's a serious situation. It is a storm, that this is another major hurricane, the second one in less than 2 weeks that's going to impact the west coast of Florida. Lives are at risk, okay? And it's important that people use responsible and reliable and ethical um, sources of information when it comes to absorbing all of this and making the decisions that you need to make in order to protect your life and to protect your property. That's my little, that's my statement of the day.
well, basically, what we're looking at, Joe, is for the second half of Wednesday into Wednesday night, from approximately noontime Wednesday to midnight, Wednesday night, Thursday morning. We are looking for Milton to go across the right across the middle of the Florida Peninsula. And anyone who, or any place that happens to be near or along that track will obviously get. And you think about what has just happened up in the Big Bend area of Florida, and now here's Florida taking another major hit in a matter of less than 2 weeks. So it's not going well for anyone who lives down in Florida with all of these. And it's all of a sudden and we mentioned this more than a few times. Here we are in October, but all of a sudden the hurricane season has become very active for the first time. And I don't even remember the last time we saw this, but for the first time in a long time, we now have on the maps not one, not two, but three hurricanes that are active all at the same time. Milton, of course, is the one that is everybody's watching because it will be making a landfall again here in the United States. But there are two others out there. There's Kirk and Leslie, and what can you say?
And neither of those are coming anywhere near. I mean, they're not coming near
Yes,
anywhere near the U.S. They're
thank goodness,
non-events.
thank
Kirk
goodness, thank God for that.
Kirk Kirk may want is going to wind up what as a post-tropical storm that's going to go into toward the English Channel, the Irish Sea, northwestern France, all in there. And we'll take a look at that um, when we get to it in just a little while.
And of course, everybody is talking about Milton's influence, unfavorable or adverse influence on Florida. But let me also point out that after Milton crosses through Florida and goes out into the Atlantic Ocean, it is going to take a beeline probably right toward the island of Bermuda. Now, by the time it gets to Bermuda, which would be sometime late Friday night, it will probably be a tropical storm, but it will still probably batter Bermuda with some heavy winds and rough surf and heavy rainfall. So Bermuda is at the moment, you know, the thinking is just like, all right, we'll take it one at a time. We'll think about them later. Right now, of course, Milton's main target will be again the central part of Florida on Wednesday.
Now, a couple of things from the stand. We're in a low tide cycle, or the early part of this week, right? We're in between, what is it, new moon and full moon?
Correct.
Uh,
We had new moon this past Tuesday. Well, let's see. No, Wednesday. Wednesday we had the new moon. So come this Wednesday, coming up, we'll have a first quarter moon, and we'll be in what is known as the neap tide. It will not be astronomically high tide, but still, regardless, it's whether you want to factor the moon's influence in or not, it's still going to be a rough go for the folks in. Again, you're right. It could be worse if we were in either a new or a full moon phase at the time of landfall, but that will not be the case.
by the way, one other thing I want to add, okay, also, because this was I actually did this on a couple of local groups here in North Georgia. Um, but I put up a post yesterday in the town group here in North Georgia, and I just basically said, look, you're going to be seeing all sorts of crap that's on the social media and the internet about Milton. Inevitably, somebody is going to post that it's headed for Western North Carolina, which by now everybody knows what the devastation that has occurred in Western North Carolina is been beyond description. Uh, and that, I just made it clear that this is going to Florida, that it's going to cross over on the other side and go out in the Atlantic. No impact here in North Georgia, no impact to the Western North Carolinas. Um, so of course the first response was, I didn't get the response I thought I might get. Um, some nasty, somebody saying something nasty. But the first response I got went down the road of how of HARP, and that this was all, orchestrated. Okay. And my response to that was, you've got people in North Carolina, in Western North Carolina, that are dead. Okay. And their bodies have yet to be found because they are buried in tons and tons of mud. Okay. When you post stuff like this, when you start posting stuff like this, you're not helping, okay? You are not doing anything other than being small and being, in my personal opinion, really evil. So you put something along those lines or anything in relation to the fact that um, the uh, theme is confiscating. They're blocking trucks, because a lot of people here. Just kudos to the folks in Georgia, in Georgia. I mean, they've all mobilized and they've been sending food up there and clothes and all the rest of it, and saying things that FEMA is confiscating all this stuff, and they're blocking people from blocking this stuff that's being sent up to get to people in order that they could then survive. You're not helping, okay? So bear that in mind. If you want to do something, but don't sit there behind your keyboard like a warrior and think that you're smarter than everybody else. Because you know what? You're not. You're not smarter than me. You're not smarter than Joe Rayo. You're not smarter than what all the expert weather people who, have had to leave their families behind to cover this stuff. All right. So just remember that. All right. I'm that's my rant. I haven't ranted in a long time, but that's my rant.
Well, a lot of people have been complaining about the fact that the government has been doing nothing. to
But
help
that's
these
it's
people
not
in that 10
true.
minutes.
It's a
And
lie. It's
it is
not
a
true.
it's a
Okay?
lie. And let me point out that the area in question, and this is the western part of North Carolina, very highly mountainous terrain. I think the tallest peak in that terrain, part of the Appalachian line, is about 6,600 feet, and there are people who live up there have experienced from Helene flooding on the order of 1 to 2 feet of water, and you just mentioned the mudslides and everything else. It would be difficult just to get up. I mean, I don't know how people live up there to begin with, but there are people who populate that area. It's difficult enough to go up there on a bright sunny day, to go there and with the the back roads and everything else. Now add a hurricane, add tremendous flooding, add all the wind and everything. It's I'm sure that for those who are trying to fortify a rescue for these people, it's next to impossible right now. And no electricity as well. I mean, it is exceedingly difficult. It's not that nobody's trying to do anything. It is exceedingly difficult to get up there
If
and
not
protect the
impossible
people.
right now.
Right. Well
The
nigh impossible.
two
So it's
interstate
not like nobody is doing anything.
two of the main interstates that go through western North Carolina, I-40 and I-26, they're gone. They were washed away. And we're talking about not just a bridge here and a piece of road there. We're talking about miles and miles of main roadway, let alone all the smaller back roads. And by the way, it should also be mentioned that Western North Carolina is a huge vacation area. Okay, and there are a lot of family owned and family run campground resorts, vacation resorts, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It was a beautiful story this morning about one on CBS Sunday Morning about a family who has one such campground in Western North Carolina that was just destroyed. The whole thing was destroyed. And they had people who were regulars there who who made who since all this happened have been making reservations, okay, and paying for those reservations as a gift to those owners who are going to rebuild. Okay, I thought it was a marvelous story about not only the spirit of somebody of a family who has lost pretty much everything to start from scratch, but the people that have come around to support them. Making vacation reservations for vacations they're never going to be able to take. They're not going to be able to take next year because it's not going to be back. It's going to
Yeah.
be longer than that. So it was a really, really nice story. At least there's an example of a good example. We'll finish this rant off with a good example of the spirit of people, of the goodness of people to reach out and to help basically strangers. But in this particular case, these were people that vacationed there on a regular basis. But nonetheless, it was a very very positive way to view everything that's happened. All right, enough. Let's go to Milton and take a look at what's on the satellite loop because we can see that the hurricane continues to organize here. All the This is the floater image. It's moving very slowly to the east. It's still kind of trapped in there in the southwest Gulf. You'll notice the feathering of the high clouds until sunset goes by and we go to the infrared. I mean, I noticed earlier what looked like the beginnings of a very, of a visible eye, but it's kind of gotten obscured again. But nonetheless, I don't see any evidence of shear here. The inflow is great. The outflow is excellent. So I expect this to continue to strengthen, and it's probably going to pass not too far offshore the north coast of the Yucatan Peninsula. So that's going to be something to watch to see if the circulation, part gets somewhat uh, affected by the landmass of the Yucatan, but we'll deal with that when it gets there. At least on the satellite view, Joe, on the loop, I mean, it looks like it's on its way to getting to at least a Cat 3 here.
Oh yeah, no, most definitely, and I agree with you that depending upon, you know, temperature of the water and where the storm ultimately intercepts or intersects those zones of warmer water. I mean, it could very well be a four. I'm not too sure about a five, but at this point, when you get to a four, does it really matter if it gets to a five, however barely or whatever? This is going to be another very nasty and a very devastating, sadly, storm system. Once again, targeting Florida. And again, Florida doesn't need this. It's bad enough they might get hit hard once a season or once during the course of a season. This is going to be two shots, two big shots in the last couple of weeks for the Sunshine State.
The 7 p.m. Central Time advisory is out. 22.5 north, 93.4 west. So this is about 250 miles west northwest of Progreso, Mexico, and it's 780 miles west southwest of Tampa. It's got a long way to go here. Top winds are 85 miles per hour, moving east. Actually, it's moving just south of due east at 7 miles an hour. And the lowest pressure that they're carrying on the advisory now is down to 981 millibars, 28.97 inches. And we'll check it out on just to give it the wider view here. Now, there were two separate systems, it should be noted. And this is one of the problems we had last week with the weather models, Joe, because there's a non-tropical wave on an old frontal boundary that's moving across Florida today. And I think when we went through that period last week where the models didn't seem to be doing very much of anything with this, was because it was putting its emphasis on this non-tropical wave and kind of ignoring what was going on south of Mexico. We didn't really mention it last week, but there was a tropical depression that came inland, right near that. You see that the narrowest point of between the Pacific side of Mexico and the Bay of Campeche. It came inland late last week, and the surviving disturbance emerged into the Southwest Gulf. That is what is now redeveloping in and has developed into Milton. There's been heavy rains all day today throughout much of the state of Florida. That is again associated with a lead low that is moving out to the northeast and not part of Milton itself. The interesting thing about this is that much like what we saw with Helene, where we had that cold front approach the day before, 2 days before, and the day before, producing heavy rains in the Carolina mountains and down here into North Georgia, that set up the wet ground. Then you brought the hurricane, the rains from the hurricane in it last Thursday night and Friday. Well, now we're getting a good soaking with some potential flash flooding in Florida from this first wave going by, leaving everything saturated. Now you're going to put the hurricane on top of that, and that's going to be very problematic.
Very problematic indeed. I mean, it's bad enough they're going to have to deal with a hurricane at midweek, but now you have that lead low pressure system adding its own share of moisture to the equation, uh, moistening things up, so to speak, in advance of the big rains that'll be coming from Milton on Wednesday. It's just, if I were the governor of Florida right now, I'd be shaking my head and saying, what did we do to deserve something like this? But that's what happens sometimes. In some years, down in the southeast, down in Florida, it's not the first time they've ever had to go through a period where they've had more than one tropical cyclone. But this apparently is going to hit them again and hit them quite hard on Wednesday. And meantime, while all this is happening, we're sitting here in the Northeast and basically, and I put the word basically in quote marks, basically enjoying a rather tranquil weather pattern, except, Joe, as you are well aware, we have a couple of weather fronts that we have to deal with. One, a warm front, and following close behind a very sharp cold front, which has been generating some real nasty weather in the form of some localized heavy showers and storms. And you just give me the cue, and I will bring up the first radar of the
All
night.
right, yeah, hold on. Let's go. Let's go through. Let me go through. We'll go through all the Milton stuff, and then, and as I was just going to point out on the U.S. satellite loop, you could see the blow up of storms in western New York and western Pennsylvania. it's a pretty impressive squall line here that's moving eastward. And there are numerous severe thunderstorm warnings that have been issued for parts of western New York and for western Pennsylvania. And you're right, the rest of the country, by the way, is tranquil. So these are the two main stories here. Uh, the I think the severe weather is very, it's short term and fast. Uh, the hurricane obviously is the one that's going to have the bigger impact in a couple of days. But otherwise, much of the rest of the country is really in, um, well, I guess what we could call October mode, where the weather is relatively tranquil. Now, the Hurricane Center's forecast. This was on the 5 p.m. They update these, when they update these, it's on the main advisory time. So the next one will be at 11 o'clock tonight. But you can see the track is pretty much the same from earlier. They may have just kind of nudged it a little bit further south. You see how they have it as a major hurricane by tomorrow afternoon, and they keep it a major hurricane as it passes north of the northernmost coast of the Yucatan Peninsula, then starts to turn northeast by 1 a.m. Wednesday. They have it centered right on 25 north and 85 west. And by 1 p.m. Wednesday, it's just getting, just before landfall, uh, close to Tampa Bay or just south of Tampa Bay, somewhere in that range from, I guess, from Fort Myers to the south to Tampa Bay to the north. That's probably the risk zone here. And I think we're going to see, and we'll see various runs wobble a little south and wobble a little north, but I think pretty much it's going to be somewhere in there. Uh, the uh, the problem is anybody that's south of that track is going to wind up that's where the big storm surge is going to be. So you're going to have storm surge effects that could go all the way down to the southwestern corner of Florida. If you're north of the track, you'll have more of an east wind. But the trick is where is exactly the landfall going to be? So and no one's going to be able to really tell you that until we get to Wednesday.
Right. And I'm sure that there'll be all kinds of stuff on social media, um, especially from people who are rumor mongers, so to speak, trying to make it sound. I mean, it's as bad as it already can get. But I mean, you'll be seeing people saying, it's the end of the world and all that sort of stuff, trying to scam. And I'm sure that every food store, every market that is anywhere near the path of the storm is going to be pretty well emptied out by the time we get to tomorrow. Even though there are officially from the Hurricane Center or from the National Weather Service, there's nothing up yet. No advisories, no watches, no warnings anywhere in Florida. That will change very quickly, come probably first thing tomorrow morning.
Right. We've got tropical storm warnings and hurricane watches up for the north coast of the Yucatan from the west to the east. I know a lot of folks go down to, or vacation in the Yucatan. So just as a point of information here, these are the hurricane model tracking models. They've been sort of vacillating a little bit south and a little bit north on every other run. The 12Z run came a little bit south. The 18Z run came a little bit north. It's not big changes, but you could see the cluster is right in that zone. Fort Myers to on the southern end, Tampa or a little bit north of Tampa on the northern end. That's where the vast majority of the models show this going. Notice not a single one. There's one outlier model that takes it well off the North Carolina coast moving northeastward, but that's an outlier. All the rest of them turn it eastward, taking it close to Bermuda in a couple of days. But yeah, and there's always confidence when you look at these, when you see them clustered together relatively close. It gives you a good feel of confidence as to where this is ultimately going to wind up. Now, the intensity model guidance has gotten very bullish. I mean, you've got a bunch of models that take it at least to a Cat 4. You have three models that actually bring it up to a Cat 5 with in the next 48 hours. Now, that takes us to Tuesday evening. After Tuesday evening, they all kind of show it kind of sloping downward, but If you assume that landfall is somewhere between 72 and 84 hours, the vast majority of the models have it at least as a Cat 3, and a few of them have it as a Cat 4. So it's a pretty good bet that this is going to go in as a major hurricane. I'll go back to what I said at the beginning of the show. I think there's a chance that we could see this, get to be a really strong Cat 4 or even a Cat 5 when it's in that middle part of the Gulf before it gets into that area where Helene upwelled the water and cooled it off. In fact, let me bring up. I'm going to bring up the Gulf of Mexico water temperatures, and we'll take a look at. Uh, let's see. We'll think it's this one. Actually, this one's a pretty good one. This goes. Let's see. I want to see how far back it goes before I should know. This doesn't go far enough, unfortunately, as far as the date is concerned. So this is the wrong one. Um, okay, where is the map that I pulled up? I pulled this up on my phone earlier. Uh, I have figures. Let me try this again. Okay, let's see. Uh, Gulf of Mexico, sea surface temperature. Here we go. I wanted to get the contour charts. There, finally. All right, give me 1 second, folks. I'll have it up here in a moment because will give us the latest in the water temperatures here. So I'll switch it over now. And all right, so here's where it, here's the area in the mid Gulf that I'm talking about. There's a big pock right now. It's in a really large area of 30 degrees C water. Okay, then there's a bit of a break where the water temperatures are about a degree or so lower. Then there's another big patch that it around between 86 and 87 west, where the water temperatures are above 30 degrees Celsius, and that is certainly supportive of a Category 5. But then you see the area to the east of that, where the water temperature drops to about 29 Celsius, and even a small area of less than 29. So this is all this area here in the Eastern Gulf is the area where we saw Helene go by, which is all upwelled, and that's why the water temperatures there are a bit lower. Still high enough to support a Cat 4, and certainly a strong Cat 3. And then when it approaches the Florida West Coast, there is a shelf here of 30 degrees Celsius or higher. So if there is some weakening, my suspicion is that it's going to be limited because of the warmer water that's just off the Gulf, the coast of the western part of Florida. The northern part of Florida, the shelf water is actually quite cool. It's down less than 28 C relative to what's the rest of the Gulf. So it'll be interesting to see when it traverses all of this, what it winds up doing.
And yeah, so, and of course we have always said the track is probably forecasting the track is probably the easiest for the short-term models, but the intensity forecasts always sometimes fall a bit short. I don't say that in terms of, let's say, you're calling for a category 2 and it ends up a category 4, or even vice versa. It's always very, very difficult because you're taking into account so many different things, the water temperatures and the state of the atmosphere as well, shear and whatever. But it looks like anywhere from basically Sarasota, Florida, and then going northeast up to about and very close to Orlando, and then to the Space Coast, Cape Canaveral. That's going to be the track for the second half of the day. Excuse me, on Wednesday. Think, Joe, of all of the people who have planned maybe upwards to a year to have their vacation in Orlando and at Disney World and all those hotels, and think now about what's happening right now. So many people who might even be canceling their flights, canceling their hotel reservations, and Disney, I'm sure, is going to have to close or shut down on Wednesday and maybe even Tuesday as well. What a problematic and complicated scenario again for Floridians, and again for the second time in less than 2 weeks. It's really been very active and very crazy. And you think about it, it was so quiet for a long time, and now all of a sudden, here we are in October. We're almost now coming up on a month past the peak of the traditional hurricane season, and now all of a sudden, everything is boiling, so to speak. Everything is getting very, very active all of a sudden.
Uh, okay, so let's go ahead and you can pull up the radars now. They're all set to go, and let's take a look at what's going on in upstate New York and in western Pennsylvania with this squall line ahead of a cold front that is headed for the northeast and northern mid-Atlantic states later tonight and for the first part of tomorrow.
Okay, and as I said before, here in the northeastern part of the country, we're dealing with not one but two fronts. Now, the first front is a warm front, and that front possibly, even though it doesn't show on radar, but possibly it could generate an isolated shower. That's not going to be a big deal. Later tonight, here in the tri state area in the Hudson Valley, we will be in the warm wedge of air, the more humid wedge of air that will set the stage for the cold front that is moving in from the north and west. You see, this is the radar out of Cleveland, Ohio, and take a look. You could see how very quickly, once we get the loop started from 3 hours ago, how all of these showers and storms suddenly develop along that frontal line, moving out of northeastern Ohio and into northern and western sections of Pennsylvania. So that's Cleveland. Let's take a look here at, well, we'll go to Pittsburgh, and you could see it's a very well defined squall line right here. And this is why, as Joe mentioned, there are a number of different thunderstorm advisories, thunderstorm warnings that have been posted. Some of this activity, and I saw on the SPC Outlook, Joe, that they had this entire area outlined for a slight risk of severe and also about a 2% chance of tornadic activity. And you can see it's moving pretty good. It's moving along, trucking along on a northwest to southeast trajectory. Notice also, though, that in the final few frames of the loop, that there's the beginnings, or there are some signs that the storms are beginning to diminish some, probably as they run into slightly drier air. And of course, now we're past the peak heating time of the day diurnally, so these storms are not going to be as potent later tonight, certainly as they were now and earlier on in the afternoon. We move on to State College, Pennsylvania. The radar there, and you can see the storms moving across western New York State and coming in across northern and western Pennsylvania, just about on the final frame of the loop, reaching the central part of the state. And as we continue moving eastward, let's go and see if they're being picked up now in Philadelphia. This is the Philadelphia radar. I don't think that they would be coming into the range of the Philadelphia radar just yet. No, it's not. However, the way the frontal line, the cold front, is moving, it looks like sometime between about, I would say, 2 and 4 a.m. or 2 and 5 a.m. in the after midnight hours, in the wee hours of the morning before sunrise, this front will be working its way into northern New Jersey, southeastern New York, and it would not be at all surprising if you're up at 3, 4, 5 a.m., might even hear a rumble or two of thunder. Now, about that time, most of the potency of these storms will probably be pretty well, done. It does not look like we're going to be in line for anything like severe weather in New York. This is the Binghamton radar here, and you can see there's the line. And again, notice that the thunderstorms are beginning to start showing signs of petering out a little bit before they get to Binghamton. But again, a lot of this is still going to be lingering when the front passes through the New York area, let's say in the hours just before sunrise tomorrow morning. So don't be surprised. There may be a couple of showers here and there, and again, maybe a rumble or two of thunder. But most of this, if not all of it, will be pretty well east of New York City by or soon after sunrise. And tomorrow should evolve into an improving day with clouds and maybe a lingering shower giving way more and more to developing sunshine. There'll be a bit of a breeze blowing from the northwest behind the front as well. And it looks like once this happens, once this front moves on through, we're going to be in line for some wonderful weather for most, if not all, of this upcoming week. Perfect fall weather, it would seem, with developing sunshine tomorrow and sunny skies and coolish temperatures. We'll be looking at temperatures, Joe, probably in the mid and low 60s for highs, in spite of the bright sunshine by mid and late week. And low temperatures, I said it got down here to 45 this morning at my house. Temperatures by midweek, low temperatures, overnight temperatures could be down close to 40 degrees and well north and west. There could even be some frost conditions or frost advisories posted. It'll get that chilly by the middle and latter part of the week as it looks like fall is finally going to be here.
On the wide radar view, which I've just switched to, you can see that the line extends up into Canada, to the St. Lawrence Valley and points northward. Also, the yellow boxes that indicate severe thunderstorm warnings, they have thinned out now. A lot of the ones that were up earlier, there were over a dozen severe thunderstorm warnings up an hour ago. Most of those have expired. There's a few left to play through, and the line is not going to be nearly as strong as Joe mentioned by the time it reaches the coast. So it's a quick shot of rain, and the amount of rain is minimal, except a little bit more perhaps in northern New England, particularly in northern Maine, could get a little bit more out of this. But for the most part, that's it. The rest of the country is quiet. And the other thing I want to point out is here in Florida, where we've got pretty much statewide rains, except the western portion of the Panhandle, just sitting in clouds there. But it's been raining pretty much all day long. There's some heavier downpours in the southern half of the state. You can see the yellow and red echoes on the radar there, and also out into the Keys. Again, this is from a frontal wave, a wave on an old front that is moving along to the northeast, and not part of Milton. It's a totally separate system. Storm Prediction Center had a slight risk and a severe thunderstorm watch up, which is getting whittled away fairly quickly now in western New York and western PA. General thunderstorms in the southeast. No severe weather's forecast for Monday. For Tuesday, we now have a marginal risk for severe weather posted for much from the middle part of Florida on the western part of the state, and then kind of extending down into southeast Florida as well. This is for Tuesday into Wednesday. So this will be on the approach, perhaps Tuesday night into Wednesday morning, with some of the lead bands that come in, that there could be some areas of severe weather. And I suspect that we'll probably have tomorrow, when we'll see the Wednesday forecast tomorrow. On Tuesday, we'll see their tornado predi- uh, prediction in terms of their percentage chances. And I suspect we're going to probably see areas of 2 and 5% going up by the time we get to Tuesday. And this again would be for Wednesday into Wednesday night. I just want to quickly acknowledge, by the way, we've got 3 super chat hits. Steve Lapointe. Thank you, Steve. It's good to see you back on the chat board, by the way, because you've been gone for a while. And thank you for the kind words. Most appreciated. William Uber, who really likes to see me hacked off. I'll use the cleaner word to describe my feelings at the beginning of the show. Thank you, Bill. And Brandon Doherty, thank you for hitting Super Chat tonight. And again, appreciate you going along with what I was saying with regards to all the stuff that's out there, the misinformation, et cetera, et cetera. And, as I said earlier, it's not useful. Rainfall. Okay, so here's where it gets a little dicey in Florida. We've got a pretty large area of 7 to 10 inches being forecast for central and northern Florida, away from the Panhandle. It really tails off over the Panhandle. Kind of nudges in for a couple of inches in southeast Georgia to about Savannah. WPC's actually shifted the rain area, the northern edge of this, a little bit further southeast than what they had 24 hours ago. Also, you can see these patches offshore of 10 inches plus. We'll see how it goes. The one positive from all of this is the fact that this thing is going to be moving along, so that at least it does prevent, perhaps, from rainfall getting too crazy. When I say too crazy, I'm talking about 15, 20, 25 inches of rain. That's not likely to happen because this thing is going to be moving at a pretty good clip when it reaches the Florida coastline. So there's
Absolutely. This is not like what we had with Helene, where if you remember, Helene was moving through the Gulf of Mexico and reached the Big Bend area. Now, normally, climatologically speaking, in late September, early October, when you have a storm, a tropical system from the Gulf moving along up toward, let's say, northern Florida, typically it would make the big curve out across the northern part of Florida, out into the Atlantic Ocean, and then either move either adjacent to the Atlantic seaboard or maybe curving away from the Atlantic seaboard. That did not happen with Helene because if you remember, we had a big blocking area of high pressure over the Great Lakes and Northeast, and Helene just simply could not move in that direction. Plus, the fact we had low pressure, a closed upper level low pressure system that was moving in from the central part of the United States, helping to merge with Helene. So Helene instead ended up going north and then northwest. And also at the same time, it slowed down significantly. It was rolling along at like 20 and 25 miles an hour. And all of a sudden, encountering all of this, it was like meteorological gridlock. It just slowed down, and that allowed for the tremendous rainfall totals of 1 and 2 and even close to 3 feet of rain in some localities, especially up in the mountains of northwestern South Carolina, western North Carolina. It encountered with an upslope flow, an easterly flow with those mountains, orographic lifting, and that helped to produce or accentuate or enhance the rainfall totals in the Carolinas. As Joe just mentioned, now with this impending tropical system, Milton, the one good thing, if there's anything good to say about this, it's that it's going to be a fast mover. As I mentioned at the top of the show, it's going to cut right across central Florida in a matter of just 12 hours, from noon on Wednesday to midnight on Wednesday night, early Thursday morning. It's going to zoom right across. That will help that fast movement to help to hold down the heavy precipitation. So instead of getting, let's say, up to 2 feet of rain, some may only get, he says, 6 to 12 or 8 to 10 inches of rain in that time frame. Still a lot, still a tremendous amount to deal with, but nothing to compare with the devastating amount that they received in the Carolinas with Helene, because again, the whole upper pattern is much, much different than what we were dealing with the first tropical system, as opposed to the impending system coming up this week.
Well, Joe was talking about that. The differences. I had the map up. I overlaid what the upper air looked like with Helene, with that big upper low that dropped down into the lower Mississippi Valley. That was a highly unusual setup that happened. And then you can see the difference with regards to what the upper air looks like on Thursday. Over Florida is the upper air feature that represents Milton. And we have a deep trough with an upper low sitting in Atlantic Canada that's down the East Coast, creating a really strong northwest flow all the way down to Southern Virginia and North Carolina. That's going to get caught in that trough, and it winds up getting ejected to the east eventually. And there you go. In fact, the second short wave drops down next Sunday into the eastern part of the United States, and an even stronger short wave behind that for the following week, which is going to bring down a very, very chilly air mass. And by the way, the gyre in Central America is still there. And it's highly likely that we may wind up seeing another tropical storm or possibly even another hurricane coming out of the Northwest Caribbean. The GFS has been showing this for days now. A few other models have too, and you can see it here going over west on this particular run, going over western Cuba and then running out through the Bahamas into the Northeast. The overnight run, Joe, I don't know if you saw it this morning, but I'll go back to the zero Z run which had that trough for early next week, dropping down, uh, kind of bypassing that, and an even stronger western trough behind it comes down and carves out this monster trough from Minnesota down to Texas, and it picks up whatever comes out of the Northwest Caribbean, brought it right over Central Florida again, and then ran it up the eastern seaboard. Now, obviously, this is long range. It's there on one run, gone the next. This run looked a little bit suspicious with regards to what it was doing. The runs that followed this have a much different solution. They drop this big trough down into the eastern part of the United States, and and it winds up picking up if there is going to be a follow up storm. But that's something to talk about. We got to get through Milton and get that out of the way. But overall, this is a very cool pattern that is setting up here for the next couple of weeks. And CPC was on top of this with their below average temperature forecast that they had in their long 8 to 14 day long range back last Wednesday. If this upper air verifies, I think you're indeed going to see some rather chilly air coming down a week from now. On top of what comes down this week, the air mass that follows is going to be even chillier.
On the chat board, one of our people, and I apologize in advance. I'm not sure if I'm going to pronounce this correctly. Noan Nguyen. I hope I pronounced that correctly. If I did not, I apologize. He writes electricity cables near trees, etc. Infrastructure mistakes. I didn't expect America to make these mistakes. Well, let me tell you, Noan, I live in a town where for the past 3 years, that the local electricity company that supplies our electricity here for this town has come along and sprayed trees alongside the roadways. At least 5 or 6 trees on my property have these bright red dots on them, which have faded, and they've had to re-put these red dots on the trees. Why? The dots are to indicate which trees are to come down because they are standing. These Joe are anywhere from 30 to 50 foot high trees that are sitting right next to cable lines. And so 3 years ago, I guess the electricity company recognized, hey, we ought to take these trees down because if we get a big storm, they're going to fall on the lines and then they're going to cause no power, which might last for many days for the people who live here. And they never came 3 years ago to cut the trees down. 2 years ago, last year in October, here is a year ago, these same guys are coming along spraying the trees, all of my trees on my property. I'm saying, what are you doing? He says, oh, we're going to take these trees down. I said, you promised that 3 years ago. Oh, well, we're definitely going to do it this year. And when November came and went, nothing. December, January, now the trees are even taller now than they were 3 years ago. And I asked one of the local politicians here, what's the story? And they said, oh, well, they ran out of money to take the trees down. But don't worry, when they get the money back, when they get enough money, they'll come and finally. And I'm saying, oofa, right? What are they waiting for? They're going to probably wait for the next huge nor'easter. The tree will come down on the electricity line. I'll be out of power for like a week or 10 days in the middle of the winter time. I mean, like you're right, Nolan. You're right. You didn't expect America to make these mistakes, and but these things happen. The politicians and the corporate people, they look at a problem and they say, all right, and then they just kick the can down the road for another year. And it really gets me upset when I have to walk my dog and I see these red dots on the trees telling them that these are the trees you're supposed to take down because they may fall on the lines. And here we go now into another year, and the trees are only getting taller. And all we need is just one big storm, Joe, and then you know what's going to happen? I'll tell you exactly what's going to happen. The trees will come down on the power lines. We'll be out of power for a week or 10 days. People will get all upset. They'll start complaining, and the politicians will turn around and say, well, the weather forecasters didn't tell us this was going to
Right.
happen.
It's all on at the end of the day.
It's always our fault, right?
It's our fault. Of course,
Yeah.
it's our fault. I will tell you that here in North Georgia, they're very good about coming out with the electric company comes out and they trim they're always trimming trees here because they're told we've got more trees than you could possibly imagine. Oh, by the way, thank you for those of you who've hit the like button. We've got 85 likes tonight. We'd love to go over 100. So if you like the show and you feel like hitting the like button, hit the
Hit
like
it
button.
now.
So let's take a look at what the GFS is doing, the latest run of the GFS. I suspect that we're at a point now where uh, we're talking Wednesday for a landfall, so just expect the models to continue to tighten up in terms of the track. The GFS, which by the way, in Helene was the only model that showed the eastward shift into uh, with the Helene Center going further east, as opposed to the other models, which were all central and west Georgia. So I have a lot of confidence in this model right now because it's really done quite well. But you can see what's happening here. It takes it actually on this run. It looks like the landfall would be just barely to the north of Tampa. So, again, you're going to probably see a little wobbles a little bit further north and a little bit further south as we go along. Also, this frontal wave that's going out off of Florida, uh, it actually deepens it down into the 990s.
113.
And you wonder whether there might be a little tropical storm that'll come out of this that goes right toward Bermuda. That's the lead frontal wave. But we'll see what the Hurricane Center's not mentioning anything in the outlooks about it that I saw. And notice the big high coming down over Lake Superior once the squall line, once this line of showers goes by during the overnight period and moves out. We've got a dry, chilly air mass that builds in, high pressure coming down from Canada over Lake Huron. There's a couple of people on the chat board that love it when I say Lake Huron. That is going to prevent this from moving northward, along with the strong northwest flow in the upper atmosphere. So Milton will eventually kind of get escorted out to the east. might it might re-strengthen to a certain extent once it's offshore again. We'll see, but it's basically going out to the east and goodbye. And notice that most of the country this week, precipitation is minimal. We've got another front that's coming through next Sunday, and a big high, Joe, a 1036 high near Lake Winnipeg, coming down, and some patches of blue precip wise in northern New York and northern Vermont and New Hampshire, maybe the first snow showers um, with this front. And this big high brings down a rather impressive shot of cooler air across the Great Lakes, Ohio Valley, down in the Northeast, the Mid Atlantic states, and even into the deep South. The 540 thickness, which is what we like to look at in the wintertime, as the rain snow line gets all the way down to southern Virginia, if the GFS is correct. So as cool as it will get this week, it's going to, if this is correct, it's going to get a whole lot cooler a week from now.
Sure will. Sure will. Before we sign off tonight, and I think we'll probably pass on Briller Jeopardy because of all of the talk about the hurricanes. I think, but I do want to end this. Somebody asked us early on the chat board about an astronomical event, and Joe, I'm going to put this up and share it with everybody.
All right, I'll flip you in a second. I just want to really quick, the icon uh, is a is a little bit further south while it's over the Yucatan. Actually, kind of skims the north coast of the Yucatan and then goes northeast toward Tampa, also, or just south of Tampa. So like it's between Tampa and Fort Myers. And the European today, just back this up, was also a little bit further south than the GFS, not quite as south as the icon, but about, right there, somewhere between Tampa and Fort Myers, but closer to Tampa on the European than it is to Fort Myers. And then all three of the models just take it straight out to the east. Okay, now I'm going to flip it over to you so you can do your thing.
Well, and I just want to alert everybody that we have been watching in the morning sky just before sunrise the approach and development of a beautiful comet. The comet was discovered by the Purple Mountain Observatory in China, and I believe it is pronounced Tushishan, and it was discovered by the Purple Mountain Observatory or Tushishan in China, and the Atlas being an acronym for Asteroid Terrestrial Impact Last Alert System. There are two telescopes, robotic telescopes in Hawaii, one in South Africa, one in Chile. They're watching the skies 24/7 to alert us as to whether or not there might be an asteroid coming precariously close to the Earth that might possibly be on a collision course. That's what ATLAS stands for. Again, Asteroid Terrestrial Impact Last Alert System. Well, that system, along with the Purple Mountain Observatory in China back in January in 2023, caught sight of a comet way, way out, more than half a billion miles away from the sun. It has been traveling toward the sun all of this time. It rounded the sun on September 27, is now heading back out into space, but it is going to be making a close pass within about 45 million miles of the Earth on October 12th, the former Columbus Day. That's coming up in just about a week. Look at the display. This is taken by a friend of mine on the big island of Hawaii who took this shot just before sunrise. You see the bright star-like head of the comet, and look at the long tail that is stretching out beyond the comet head. Now, the comet is going to be very close to the sun for most of this week, and we're not going to be able to get a good view of it. But beginning next weekend, next Saturday, you should, if you step outside after sunset, look into the western sky about half an hour or 45 minutes after sunset. You should see this comet, which should be even brighter and even more distinct with its tail in the west after sun. You don't have to get up at the crack of dawn. All you have to do is just go outside after
So
sunset.
I could get up at the crack of noon.
You can get up at the crack of noon and stick around until the sun goes down and around 6 or 7 o'clock in the evening. And this is what you should be able to see. I would not be surprised, Joe, if a lot of people, I haven't seen much of this in the news media, and maybe there'll be some stuff this week about it, but people going out, let's say on a Saturday night or Sunday night next week, and going to dinner somewhere, looking into the west after, oh my God, Charlie, look at what is that? What is that thing with the long tail and the bright thing? That's the comet. That's Comet
The end
50
times, Joe. It's the end times.
Yeah, exactly. Well, people used to think of comets as an evil omen, and I don't know what you want to read into this, but it is a very unusual sight. This will probably be the most significantly bright comet that we've had since Comet Hale-Bopp 27 years ago in 1997. But it's out there, it's developing, and it's going to be coming your way and my way beginning next weekend in the evening sky. So, want to alert everybody to that. Should be a beautiful sight. Looking forward to seeing it. But until then, all we can do is hope for good weather. And this week, it looks like we're going to have fairly good weather, at least up here in the northeastern part of the country.
And we will be coming your way again tomorrow night at 7:35 p.m. Eastern Time. Don't forget also to check the community uh, tab on YouTube because I do post there with links to stories that I write for my website. Also, if weather is really your thing and you want an experience that doesn't have, you know, ads and crap and everything else, uh, you can uh, you can support our channel also by joining my weather platform on Patreon, and that's patreon.com/meteorologist Joe Chaffee. So that is the end of my shameless self promotions. Thank you for the 123 likes so far, Mr. Rayo, and
Yes.
probably a few more to come when people watch this on a replay. Brandon Doherty, William Uber, Steve Lapointe, thank you for hitting the tip jar tonight. Very much appreciated that you hit Super Chat. And also, just want to mention that the Joe and Joe Weather Show podcast is on Spotify. It's on Apple Podcasts. It's on YouTube Podcasts. It is now also on Amazon Podcasts in Audible. We just got picked up last week, Mr. Rayo,
That sounds
on
great.
Amazon.
The more the
Also,
merrier.
you can find us on iHeartRadio, and yes, we're there. And you can also find us on a few other uh, sites that where podcasts make their home. So we're there. You can't find, and of course, you can get us here on YouTube Sunday through Thursday at 7:35 p.m. We'll be back tomorrow night at 7:35 p.m. Mr. Rayo, have a great night. Everybody else, have a great night too.
I
Bye
would have had a
bye.
I would have had a greater night if the Mets won, but they can't win them all, so we'll see.
Oh, for sure.
For sure. Good night, Joe.
Good night, Joe. Good night, everybody.